welcome to the January the 23rd, 1990 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of Grand Prairie and bring you some of the very important people that are responsible for some of those happenings. And this is our history tape number 112, number 112, and we are so honored today that we have a very special couple that's been very important to Grand Prairie, Texas. And we're so pleased to welcome to our show Mr. and Mrs. Marsalis, Jerry and Charlotte. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're just so excited to have some younger generation folks on here that have been very important, even thus far, making history very important to Grand Prairie, Texas. And Charlotte, we're going to take Jerry first, and since he is center stage, and let him start our history tape by giving his genealogy. Jerry, would you tell us a little bit about your family, give us your parents' names, and would you maybe tell us a little bit about where they lived?
Yes, my father was born in Clarendon, Texas, moved to Quanah, Texas at the age of 4. My mother was born about 10 to 12 miles west of Seymour, Texas, and moved to Quanah at the age of 11. My father was a railroad engineer for 48 years, or worked on the railroad for 48 years, and my mom was always a housewife.
All right, now we need your mother's full name for our documentation. Would you do that for us?
Yes, my mother's full name is Bobby LaRue Marsalis. She's always gone by LaRue. My father's name is Elton B. Marsalis. Middle initial was Brian, and he always went by Elton.
And you have lost your dad, but you still have your mommy.
My dad is deceased, and I'm very fortunate to have my mom. She's, I guess, 79.
Mm-hmm. And does she still continue to live in Quanah, Texas?
Yes, ma'am. She lives alone, and the good Lord's been good to her, and her health is relatively good for a person 79 and living alone.
All right. Do you have any brothers or sisters that you'd like to name drop in this genealogy tape?
I have one sister, Barbara Ann Nelson, resides in Lubbock, Texas. I have one brother, Stephen, who had the misfortune of being born retarded, and he's resided in Abilene State School in Abilene, Texas since November of 1961. I visit him almost monthly and care very deeply about my brother as well as my sister.
Wonderful. All right, we're going to let you rest for a minute, Jerry, when we establish Charlotte's genealogy, and then we're going to get back to you and let you tell us when you were born and where, and maybe some of the grade school activities you had when you were a young man. So Charlotte, look out into your camera now and tell us all about Charlotte and her family.
Well, Ruthie, my mother and father, my mother was born in Humboldt, Kansas, and my father was born over in Denton County in and around Louisville, Texas. They met when my mother came to Texas at the age of 18 to hold a revival. Both my parents are licensed ministers with the Assemblies of God and had been for over 60 years when my father passed away 2 years ago. They married and traveled around Texas, never pastored anywhere but in Texas, and settled in Quanah in 1957, I guess. That was their second pastorate. They had pastored there in 1945 for 4 years. And we moved there again in 1957, and Dad pastored there for about 12 years. And Jerry and I got married at that time. We got married in 1958, I think. I forget sometimes.
Yes.
And both of our children were born in Quanah, Texas. We have 2 daughters, Celinda and Denise. They both graduated from South Grand Prairie High School. Celinda graduated in 1978, and Denise graduated in 1982.
We're going to get back with you on those 2 children of yours later and let us talk about grandchildren and all of the good stuff. But I wanted to know if you would be willing to tell us when and where you were born. And
I was born in Decatur, Texas.
All right.
My parents did not live in Decatur. My grandparents did. We were visiting, my parents were visiting there when I decided to be born.
all right.
In Decatur, and the hospital I was born in still stands in Decatur, Texas.
Would you like to name your grandparents? Are they your maternal or paternal grandparents? Your mother's or your father's?
My mother's parents, I knew both of them. They were both living when I was born. My grandmother only passed away about 4 years ago. Their name was Norris. My grandfather worked for Carnation Milk Company in Wichita Falls for several years. He was a night supervisor there. My grandmother, of course, was a housewife, and my father's mother lived in Dallas until she died in 1956.
Now, we'd like for you to tell us about you lost your father to death, but how about your mommy?
Now, my mother's still living. She lives in Wichita Falls, Texas. She also lives alone. She's 79 years old and still drives a car and, you know, goes about her little chores of doing what she wants to do by herself.
All right. Do you have any brothers or sisters, Charlotte?
I have one sister who is older than I am, who lives in Athens, Texas, and one brother who is younger than I am, who lives in Quanah, Texas.
Would you like to name both of those, please?
My sister is Nolene Clanton, and my brother is Noel Brooks Jr.
Wonderful. All right, that sets the stage for us, Jerry. We've gotten her down a little farther than you, but now tell us where Jerry was born.
I was born in Quanah, Texas, June the 26th, 1940.
That was a good year, wasn't it? All right, when you were born in Quanah, did you live around Quanah all your life?
I lived all my life in Quanah until I moved to Grand Prairie in December of 1965. But yes, I was born and reared, went through the school system in Quanah. And
What was your graduating class?
Class of 1958.
1958. And going to Quanah in 1958, were you involved in any of the scholastic and athletic activities in particular, that you have a favorite teacher, a favorite subject, or something about Jerry Marsalis?
I always liked math. I was on the slide rule team, and that was before the days of computers. We did things a little slower. We did them by hand, but I loved math. I was on the slide rule team, went to state. I believe I took second in state. A buddy of mine from Quanah took first in state that year, and participated in sports and other activities, and I have many fond memories of Quanah and the school system there. I think there's something to be said about small schools. My graduating class was 76, and you really got to know each other and communicate. And there was a lot of bus routes there and old mud streets that are mud country roads, and when it rained and the buses couldn't run, well, you took kids in your home and they spent the night and school went on.
All right, during all of this time when you were in the class of 57, what did your dad do for a living, and what did you do for either recreation, or did you work?
Well, my dad went to work for the QANP, that stands for Quanah Acme and Pacific Railroad.
All right.
The Frisco later bought them out, but he went to work for the railroad in 1925 and worked for them 48 years. I went to work in a grocery store at the age of 12, and I worked in a grocery store after school and Saturdays from the time I was 12 till I finished high school, and went to barber school. But I know what it is to work from 7 to 11 in a little small town grocery store on Saturday, believe me.
All right, and tell us about this barber school. Where was it located, and what motivated you to choose that for a profession, Jerry?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was deciding and trying to make up my mind whether I wanted to be a mortician or whether I wanted to be a barber. Maybe not for a lifetime profession, but at that time I thought I wanted to become a dentist. And because of my brother and financial circumstances, I looked at the schools to supplement my income, I thought, while going through college. And I visited with the mortician at home and come to Dallas and checked the mortician school out. And I went to Amarillo, Texas, to the Amarillo Barber College and checked it out. And I just seemed to like the barber profession, and I got encouragement from some of the barbers at home. And I just decided that I'd go to barber school, and did so in the 25th of June, right after I graduated from high school. And back those days, you only had to go to barber school 6 months or 1,000 hours, and you took a state test and worked under a master barber for 18 months and went back and took a master test. So I graduated in the 24th of December of '58, and with Charlotte tugging on me real hard, we married Christmas Day in 1958.
And you were a full-fledged barber by then.
No, ma'am, I was going on faith.
You were going on faith.
I didn't even have my barber license, but I had confidence that I could pass the test in Austin, and thank God I did in January, and I already had a job at home. And I went to work the first part of January and continued to work there until Christmas Eve in 1965. And in 65, I lost a real good friend to Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yes.
It was Roland Walden. It was a president of Security National Bank in Quanah. And Roland got the opportunity to come down to Grand Prairie and become the president of what was then the Midway National Bank. And Roland came back to home and gave me an opportunity, encouraged me, said that the directors were building a new bank in Grand Prairie over on Carrier. And he said he thought it was a great opportunity for me and my family, and would certainly back me financially if I would choose to make that decision. It took 3 trips to get me away from Quanah, Texas. And I came down here in October of 65, signed the lease, went back home, and my wife was surprised, to say the least. I think my mother and dad was probably more shocked. And I sat around the table that evening and told my dad what I had decided to do. And I asked Dad what his opinion was on my decision. And he looked me in the eye, and tears kind of coming down his cheeks. He said, "Son, I think you made a real good decision for the wife and the 2 grandkids, and a bad one for your mom and I, because we're going to really miss you." And it has been a good move, and Grand Prairie's been very good to me. And I think Grand Prairie is an excellent city, and I think we are improving each day, and I love this city, and I care about it deeply.
That shows, Jerry Marsalis, and we're going to talk about your service a little bit farther down into this interview, but let's get back to Charlotte. Charlotte, is there anything that you'd like to add to the tape of this history about your school years? Did you have a favorite teacher, someone that really inspired you to excel or to better yourself?
Well, Ruthie, I graduated from high school from Pine Tree High School in Gregton, Texas.
Pine Tree, that's
Gregton no longer exists as a community. It was incorporated into Longview after we moved from there. But
and that's in Gregg County?
That's in Gregg County. My father pastored the church there. He went there when I was in the 8th grade, and he left there shortly after I graduated from high school. But just as soon as I graduated from high school in May of '57, I moved to Grand Prairie for a short period of time and lived with my sister and brother-in-law who lived here at that time. And then I went on to Quanah with my parents and got a job working in a law office. At the age of 18, I worked for an attorney, and which was very beneficial to me in later years. I have worked for attorneys for about 28 years of my life, worked for a title company for about 5 years. I am now retired and staying at home due to health problems.
Yes. All right. Of all of the time that you were living in the Pine Tree area and moving around apparently from following your father in his pastorate, did you have any favorite teachers, or what was the favorite subjects that just really spurred you on?
My favorite subjects were shorthand and typing when I was in school. I had an older sister who had really excelled in about everything that she did, and so I was trying to follow in her footsteps and do just a little bit better than she did in something. So I went to Interscholastic League in shorthand. I don't remember how far I got in that, but the last test I had at the age I am now in shorthand, I can take shorthand at about 110 words a minute, and I can type over 120. But those were my 2 best subjects, and I was determined that I was going to do very well in those 2 fields.
All right. Now, we want you to tell us how you met Jerry Marsalis, the elusive one.
Well, I had known Jerry and his family for some time because, like I said, when I was in the 1st grade of school through the 4th grade of school, my father pastored Quanah. So we had become very dear friends with the Marsalises, my family had. And over the years had kept in contact with them, and then when we would go through Quanah, their home was always open to my parents. I had always known my sister and his sister were good friends, and she had visited us. I had known her a little bit better. Jerry was always kind of ornery. So we sort of stayed away from him. He was the little mean kid on the block.
Love it.
But the way I got introduced back to Jerry when we moved, the day we moved to Quanah, and I don't recall what day that was. It was in June or July '57. My brother and I decided to drive around Quanah. And we were driving around and happened to drive down the street that Jerry lived on, and he was sitting next door at the friend's house named Alan.
Taylor.
And we recognized him and stopped to talk to him, and he came out and talked to us, and we became a little friendly then, and it seems like 2 or 3 weeks later from that, I had a date with someone else from Chillicothe, Texas, and they stood me up. And Jerry came by that night and picked me up. We went to Vernon and played miniature golf, and we went together ever since.
And it was
We've been
wonderful
together
that
ever
you,
since.
it's wonderful that you got stood up, as they used to call it.
That's right.
You bet. And then Jerry filled in a wonderful gap in your life. And you all were married. You've already given us the date of that. You've already given us the birth of your children. All right, now that you've moved to Grand Prairie, Texas, we have Jerry in the barber work, working at this Midway National Bank where Roland Walden brought him here. But what did you do when you came to Grand Prairie? Did you settle down and not do anything, or what did you go
No,
for?
the first job I had, in fact, I moved to Grand Prairie before the family myself. We were moving to Grand Prairie when we got a phone call one day from Great Southwest Corporation. Dean Doyley had worked out there and had an influence in the legal department and had gotten me a job. The only catch was I had to go to work on Monday. So Jerry had to go back to Quanah and stay with the girls, and I worked here until January the 2nd, I believe, is when he and the girls came back to stay. And I moved, you know, around from job to job, as you will do when you come, until I settled in my longest job in Arlington with some attorneys by the name of William Remington and Toby Goodman. I worked for them for 10 years.
Okay. You like to name drop any of the other places you've worked? Do you feel comfortable with doing that? If you don't, well, we'll forget them.
Well, the only place I've worked actually in Grand Prairie is back in 1967. I did work for Walter Kober for about a year, I believe it was. And then I worked for Tycor Title Company, which is no longer in existence here in Grand Prairie until I became ill.
Okay. And now that you are sort of incapacitated as far as employment's concerned, you do stay at home some, but I understand that Jerry still makes you work some. And we have here a display that we often bring things to the show, but this is one of the most beautiful afghans I have ever seen that you personally have built, crocheted, or whatever you do to do these beautiful things, and you presented that to Mr. Vernon Jackson and I because of your love for him, and that's all right, Jerry approves, and so do I, but this is a beautiful piece of handwork. Do you enjoy doing this, Charlotte?
Yes, ma'am. I do some crocheting or knitting almost every day.
And what else down at Jerry's business that you
Well,
still
Jerry
do?
has kind of made me come down to the barber shop and work. I work down there a few hours a day helping him out. We went to a new computer system, and I've been helping train girls on that. You know, just getting involved a little bit so you're not so bored after working for 30 years. You become very bored just staying at home.
All right, Jerry, we're going to let you take center stage also. Since coming to Grand Prairie, starting out at the Midway National Bank, Jerry, you've done a lot of community service. You have a lot of important contacts and friends. You're very well known over the city of Grand Prairie, and especially now as the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the city of Grand Prairie. Are there other boards or commissions that you've served on that you'd like to share with us?
Ruthie, I'm presently on the Dallas-Fort Worth Medical Center Hospital Board, and I have certainly enjoyed that. It's been a challenge, but I can truthfully say that Dallas-Fort Worth Medical Center has certainly made great strides in the few years that I've been on there, not because of my service, but because of the dedication of the employees. They have over 600 employees that I feel are very dedicated to the medical care, and I have seen the medical care greatly improved since I have had the opportunity to work on the board and with different board members.
That's great. We'll get back to you with a little bit more community service in a moment, but Charlotte, we need to follow up on the names of your children, where they are now, and those grandchildren, and name drop those and tell us their names.
Okay, Ruthie, our oldest daughter's name is Celinda Marsalis. She lives in Mart, Texas, and God only knows why she's living there. She moved there in August of this year and
Yes.
took our lovely Granddaughter, Brittany. Brittany's last name is Henderson. She's
And how
7
old?
years old.
7 years old.
She'll be 8 in July.
Okay.
And our younger daughter lives in Corsicana. Her name is Denise. She was very active in South Grand Prairie as a volleyball player. She has one child who will be 2 April the 5th, a son, and his name is Joshua Allen. And he proves to be a real boy.
A real boy. That is wonderful. And I remember when Joshua was born, we really did not expect him to survive except by the will of the good Lord.
That's correct. He was in the hospital for over 4 months. He was born very premature. He was only 27 weeks old when he was born into this world. He weighed 2 pounds and 5 ounces. He went through about 5 surgeries, including a surgery on his heart and a resection of his colon 3 different times. And the doctor calls him a miracle baby. But because of the love of his mother and the love of God, I believe that God saw to it that someone somewhere down the road needed that grandchild in their life.
You bet. All right, Jerry, we'd like for you to talk about church. I know that we visited your congregation several times, many times, and
Yes.
we'd like for you to talk about that, and then we're going to let Charlotte talk about it too.
Charlotte and I are members of Abundant Life Assembly of God Church on South Carrier, and that is a growing church. Of course, we feel like it's a great location, being located just off I-20, and we enjoy going to church service there and worshiping with the people that's chosen that as their church home. And it's been wonderful watching the church grow. When that church moved from the east part of town, and I don't remember that. I believe it's called Old East Side Assembly for years. And the congregation, through faith, decided to move out and purchase land. And this past year, we had another building program, and our church has really been growing, not only in size, but I feel like spiritually. And it's wonderful to realize we just had our annual meeting Sunday as far as finances go, to see how much progress we've made and how little church debt we have with the property and everything, and I'm very thankful for that.
All right, would you like to name drop the pastor and his wife that are so influential in our community?
Yes, the pastor of that church is Reverend Bob Skipper. And Brother Skipper has probably been in Grand Prairie as a pastor of that church. I believe they said 26 years, counting the east side. Very stable, concerned man, very caring person for anyone in Grand Prairie. And with our with our church being located so close to I-20, it's amazing of the needy families that we get coming down I-20 that have car troubles or different problems that come in there. And Brother Skipper is, I think, an excellent person at reading needs, and if it's a legitimate need, I can assure you that our church tries to help those people.
Wonderful. And Charlotte, of course, you would have to testify just a little about the church because it has been so meaningful to you, especially during your illness of a malignancy, and the fact that they've given you so much support. Would you like to say something?
Yes, Ruthie, they gave me a lot of support. In fact, it was just overwhelming. And I feel like it's the prayers of my church and the goodness of God that I can sit here today.
Oh, that is wonderful. And Jerry, what's it like to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission and the hospital board where everything is always boiling, pots are going here and there, and what do you forecast for Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, Ruthie, serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission is a very learning experience. It's a challenge, but I have thoroughly enjoyed working with the members. We don't always agree, and I think that's very healthy. Sometimes when you see so many unanimous votes, I get scared that we're either all right or all wrong. I think lots of times debate and what we call the briefing session is very healthy. We do try to do most of our, so I get not fighting, but most of our, settle our differences in the back room. But it's been a very learning experience, and I thoroughly enjoy serving the community in the capacity I have. And I feel like that the Planning and Zoning Commission is a very important function of the city. I think that you have to, in my opinion, do a lot of homework. I try to drive all the cases, try to hear everyone's side, and what so many people don't understand, and certainly you've been on city council, you understand this, that when you cast a vote, you have to cast that vote for what you think is best for Grand Prairie, the city of Grand Prairie, the total population. Sometimes maybe that vote may be a 60-40 vote, 60 in favor of the citizens, and that's the hard votes. You like the votes when you feel like you're helping everyone, but sometimes there are situations that come up that you have to just make that old, what I call gut check, conscious vote. And I've always tried to do that, and as long as I'm on any board in this city, I'll always try to vote my conscience. And that's all I think you can ask anyone to do, but I also think that's what everyone should do.
Elections coming up, and we don't really get into elections, but if someone wanted to serve on a board such as Planning and Zoning, what would you suggest to a person that was interested in that as to the time that they would need to give to that? And we just have about a minute and a half.
Well, I want to be very honest and frank. To do the job you need to do, a lot of times they say, well, you only meet twice a month. Well, that's true in some cases, but we have the UDC review going on, which is United Development Code, which is taking time, and I feel like if a person is going to put in their application to serve, that they should be willing to take the time that's needed. I think my wife will say that planning and zoning has taken a lot more time than what I maybe thought it was going to take, but it's enjoyable time. It's work, but you enjoy it. I would say truthfully, if you do a good job on planning and zoning, that you have to probably give at least 12 hours a month of your time, at least 12 hours a month.
And that doesn't count all this driving around.
No, ma'am, that's just meeting with and pre-briefing and other committees that they'll put you on to help the council. Try to do some of your legwork for the council.
All right. Charlotte, in the wrap-up that we're going to do here, I'd like for you to look out into your camera and let everyone know how exciting it is to live in Grand Prairie, and would you invite anyone that lives out of this city to move here because of its benefits?
Yes, ma'am, I would. We hear a lot of derogatory remarks about Grand Prairie, but as my husband said, we moved here in 1965. Grand Prairie has been very good to us, both financially and otherwise. My husband is more involved in the community than I am. I kind of take a back seat to politics. But I would encourage anyone that wanted to move to Grand Prairie, put their kids in the Grand Prairie school system, because I personally think that it is a good school system regardless of what we do here. They're always trying and doing their best to make changes and to better the community and the education.
All right. That sounds like a real good view of Grand Prairie, Texas from my point of view also, Charlotte. I want to take this opportunity to thank two wonderful people, not only for building your life here in Grand Prairie, Texas, but also for the many wonderful contributions that you all have made to our city. It's been splendid having both of you all on the show. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.
Thank you, Ruthie. Enjoyed it.
And if you all will be seated for a moment.